Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm not quite as caffeinated as I normally am yet. I'm just having a little espresso shot today. But I'm super excited about what we're about to cover because it's like the most fun thing ever. Um, First of all, hope everyone's doing well. It looks like there's a few people on here. Chime in, let me know where everyone's coming from today, especially if you're new and haven't been watching the previous videos. Um, if you haven't watched them, you may want to watch them first because today is going to be kind of this like uh, magical alchemy type of lesson where we're basically going to be putting together ideas we discussed in the previous masterclass videos and seeing some really cool things happen by combining the fundamentals in ways you might not realize are already possible. So we are going to talk about like new sounds today, but we're not really going to talk about new fundamentals. Okay. Jack, always good to see you, man. Yes, sir, from California. Awesome. Justin, great to see you also. So, Los Angeles, cool. Is it, I saw you commenting yesterday. Is it Gary or Jerry? Can you spell it out for me? Let me know if it's like a G sound or a J sound. Danielle, awesome. Okay, the standard approach to getting into advanced jazz guitar. Let's start there and talk about why it's very confusing and kind of frustrating. And then we'll flip over to the way that we would do it in Melodic Triads. And I'll show you there's a lot of benefits to doing it our way. And I'm going to walk you through some of them and show you some cool voicings, some cool improv ideas, some cool solo guitar ideas. There's a lot of stuff I want to cover today. So I just want to jump right in. Bart, awesome, man. TG from Iowa, right on. Gerald, okay, so it is Jerry then. Cool, right on, man. Robert, always great to see you, man. Peter, awesome. Thanks for joining us again. David, sick. All right, let's jump in. The standard approach to advanced jazz, right, is you learn your basic theory 101, then you shed for years, maybe decades. You get all your cage system, your scales, then you get into modes and chord tones, you arpeggiate things, and then at a certain point you're basically just chasing after really complicated ideas. Everything is starting in the brain. You're learning about what was that thing that Jacob Collier made popular a year or two ago, like the negative harmony, right? So it's like you take this and then you put it on a graph and it flips 90 degrees. And then you think about how it gets to the tonic from the opposite direction. And then you invert everything. And all of a sudden you have a new chord progression. And it's like, okay, well, that's complicated. If it sounds good, it sounds good. And obviously anyone who learns it and can pull it off, that's great. The question is, are we falling into that trap that Bill Evans talked about, where most music students, in his opinion, are just trying to approximate the end product, and it makes them feel like they're like almost touching the thing, but they're never quite in control of it, right? There's always that feeling that we're faking something, that there's holes in our foundation. And what ends up happening is we end up just getting very confused. If you've ever had that feeling that you're kind of falling into a plateau where you don't know how to grow anymore, like you've reached a brick wall and you can't get through it, that's because there are holes in the foundation, right? It's probably because you were approximating some things. You intellectually understand them, which is why you don't realize that you're approximating it, because it makes sense to you intellectually, but you don't own it. It's not part of you. You can read all the books you want about trees, but that doesn't mean that you know what a tree is, or that you know how to grow a tree, or that you have grown trees, or that you have a fruit orchard, or that you can chop a tree down and build a house out of it. Like there's a very big difference between intellectually understanding a thing versus practically being able to manipulate it in a masterful way, right? That's what we're after. Bill's advice is to come back to the most elementary, fundamental ideas within music and to be real and true and authentic about it. That's where we learn to play music relatively quickly-ish. And from there, we can grow those very elementary fundamental ideas into very advanced sounds without having to get too complicated intellectually, without getting stuck in the mind. That's what we're going to talk about today. The standard approach gets us deeper into the mind, which makes it harder and harder and harder to find that sensation of freedom where we're just improvising, we're just comping, we're just in the moment having fun. And that's ultimately what we're after. Chris, good to see you again, man. And Mark and James. Wow, there's a bunch of you guys on here now. Awesome. Ozeng from Istanbul. Right on. I don't remember seeing your name in previous days. Welcome. Ron, you're not late. At the moment, I'm just kind of wrapping up why the standard approach to getting into more advanced levels of jazz is kind of confusing and kind of challenging and leaves people, frustrated even after decades of working at it, still frustrated and not playing the way that they want to be playing. I'm just reading Jerry's quote. Cool. So that's the standard approach. Now, I could go off all day over a beer, over coffee about the pros and cons of different elements within the standard approach. But what I want to do, because we don't have too much time and there's a lot I want to cover today, is I want to walk you through how we can get into the more advanced elements using melodic triads. Because to me, it's much easier and simpler and honestly just more effective. So, in Evolutionary Secret number 1, we talked about the DNA of, or what I sometimes refer to as the anatomy of melody, the DNA hiding inside of melody, which is tension and resolution, right? When we look at bebop, blues, Great American Songbook, ballads, right? We don't see scale runs and arpeggio outlining chords nearly as often as we would assume if you have a degree in jazz studies, right? Because that's the majority of what we learn there for single note melodic playing are scales and arpeggios, chord tones. That stuff is present, but it is not, to me, it does not appear to be the bulk of what's happening inside of great melody when we look at it. What we discovered during our improvisation day was that there are triads hiding inside of great melody all over the place. They're not always obvious. It's not always a 1-3-5. Sometimes you only get one triad note or two triad notes. Sometimes you get a triad, but there's a what we would refer to as a melodic tension note, right? A quadratonic. Sometimes there's chromaticism or an enclosure. There are ornamentation devices dressing that triad up, but that's like talking about putting icing on the cake. The cake has to be there before the icing can go on. With our comping, we were discussing the idea of horizontal chord movement, not vertical voicings, right? Just like with improvisation, it's not about vertically arpeggiating up and down a chord. It's about how do we move a single note forward horizontally through time. Same thing with comping. You could take just those two evolutionary secrets, just those two fundamentals, the fundamental of melody and the fundamental of harmony. You could take that for the rest of your life and only play using just that, and you could sound epic. Like if I had a gun to my head, or if a witch put a curse on me and made it where that was the only thing I could do for the rest of my life musically, I don't think I would have a single day of my life where I would regret it, where I would look back and say, man, I wish I had more devices in my fingers. Like that gig wasn't as fun as it could have been. You have total melodic freedom and total comping freedom. Okay. We're not using advanced voicings, but we can imply a huge amount of incredible music and harmony and melody, and have a lot of fun and conversational ideas, solo guitar and with other people, just with those two fundamentals. What we're going to do today is not throw the fundamentals away and study advanced intellectual ideas. We're going to talk about what happens when we combine these two fundamentals. Okay. Very magical, cool things happen when you put two fundamentals together. It's kind of like in painting, like when you have one color and another color and you put them together, they just create the illusion of a new color. There's really no such thing as that new color. It's just the way that the light refracts, whatever, off of the different pigment of it, that all of a sudden, like I'm trying to remember the primary colors. What is it? Like blue and red. All of a sudden you just have purple. Like where the hell did the purple come from? Well, it didn't come from inventing a new color. It came from putting two primary colors together. So we have a similar thing that's going to happen in music when we put the DNA of melody, triads, and the DNA of comping, shell voicings, together. So let's jump in and explore a few of these ideas. Vancouver, SoCal, Cleveland, awesome, so great. London, what's up, Mike? Great to see you, man. The first thing that we get is polytonality. Okay, for those who maybe don't know what that word means, it simply means more than one tonality. Okay, poly is multiple. Tonality is like, you could think of it as a sound, or a structure of sound. So the easiest way to think about polytonality, there's two ways we're going to look at it. There's the harmonic version and the melodic version. Let's start with the harmonic version. Okay. If we could find voicings, which we can, that involved a basic shell voicing with a triad sitting on top of it, we have polytonality. And this is where we get hardcore into that vertical thinking that I was trying to steer everyone away from a couple days ago when we were talking about comping, and I was trying to get everybody to just learn to think horizontally through time. Here, we're going to actually freeze frame. We're going to stop and say, okay, no moving through time. What happens when we just want to create a big, dense, pianistic voicing? We want to harmonize that note, and we want it over this root note. What do we put in the middle to create something really hip? To me, the best starting point for that is just a basic triad over a basic shell voicing, and we get sounds like this. Okay. This is a major 7 chord, but it is a very dark, aggressive, dense major 7 chord. If you don't have the PDF yet, make sure you download the PDF so you can actually see the chord chart of what I'm playing. This is a C major 7 shell, C, E, B, root, third, 7, nothing fancy, just C major 7. And then on top of that, I'm putting a B major triad, right? B, D sharp, F sharp, 1, 3, 5. Basic major triad, basic major 7 shell voicing. And now we have crazy modern, very aggressive, very dense, pianistic, colorful, vertical harmony. Okay. The average person, if they were to look at this voicing, would see like a relatively complex thing. Because I'm so steeped in the fundamentals, I look at it and immediately, like instinctually, I just see a shell voicing and a triad. So anywhere I go on the fretboard, I can just kind of construct these things. Again, it's not because I'm working on advanced things, it's because I'm working on the fundamentals. And so the fundamentals just pop out everywhere I look. I just see fundamentals, right? There's nothing overly talented about me in this regard. It all comes from the fact that when I got sick and lost the ability to play and had to relearn, I knew that the only way, or I felt very spiritually moved to go straight for great melody and great harmony. Like I knew that that was what I wanted 80% of my music to be. So I spent all my energy just on, okay, how do I cut through the BS and the theory and just get great melody happening, triads, and really interesting comping ideas happening, shell voices. And so I just spent some time doing that. And the more I learned to use those devices, the more, it's kind of like the Matrix. You just see like the little green symbols like dropping through the air. I just now see everything as shell voicings and triads. So I look at this voicing and I see a shell voicing and a triad. Then it becomes, once I see the vertical harmony, then I want to get back to, okay, how do things move? It's not enough to just know a cool voicing, a cool sound. This is a voicing that needs to get plugged into movement. So I want to understand how to do that. So let's go back to Peter Bernstein's comping example over Autumn Leaves from the other day. Right? C major 7. What if we just plug this voicing in instead of just playing the basic shell voicing? Now we have this very aggressive major 7, sharp 11, sharp 9 voicing. Right? Horizontal movement with one little spike of cool vertical explosion. That's the idea here. We're not necessarily trying to make every voicing we play this big explosive sound, because then we're actually going to maybe start to step on the soloist's toes. Like when you listen to great comping instruments, not every voicing grabs your attention. Okay. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they'll jump out and play some wacky, wild stuff. But a lot of times they're just creating a nice backdrop a nice foundation for the soloist to sit on top of that moves, that carries us through the form. So this is polytonality, but all it is a shell voicing in a triad. That's the harmonic version. Now that I know that a B major triad works against a C major 7 chord, okay, I also know that I can improvise with a B major triad over a C major 7 chord. So somebody asked a couple of days ago about where the triads come from. Should they be looking at like the 7 triads of the scale? There's pros and cons to that. It's not the worst idea in the world, but there are triads in the diatonic scale that aren't going to sound great, that aren't going to work that well. And there are triads that are not in the basic scale that are going to sound epic. B major is not in a C major scale. But if I were to put B major over a C major 7 shell, right? It could be a bass player playing a C root note. It could be a piano player just playing, basic 1, 3, 5, 7, C, E, G, B. Okay, your ear is developing if you hear that B note and it feels melodically like the most stable thing. If I were to try and play a C note to add it in, the harmonic root note, the C major 7 root note, not the B major root note, your ear, I'm going to trick you, your ear is going to hear that C note in relationship to the B major triad. So it's not going to sound stable. It's going to sound like a flat 2, even though it's the harmonic root note. Right, I call this the Dracula note versus melodic tone. Right, this is our emotional ear training. That's a C note over a C major 7 chord. Okay, this is polytonality in melodic movement. So I can plug that B major triad in measure 4 of Autumn Leaves, and even if the piano player is just playing some super basic C major 7 kind of vanilla boring stuff, I will be able to imply this very aggressive, dark texture. I'm adding in a melodic tension note, a tension 4, for those of you who hung out for our improvisation class. Tension 4 of B major, B, C sharp, D sharp, E. The melodic tension note that you're hearing that has that kind of whiny sus4 that wants to resolve down to the third, that's E, the major third of C major, but your ear is not hearing it as a stable chord tone anymore. Your ear is hearing it as a melodic tension that wants to resolve down to the sharp 9. So I'm taking the sharp 9 and turning it into an anchor point, a stable melodic anchor. It's like a column that's holding the building up. That's why I don't refer to this as just C major 7, and I don't like to think of it as just some type of mode. This is a C major 7, sharp 11, sharp 9. Because the sharp 11, F sharp, and the sharp 9, D sharp, are in the melodic triad, they are governing the melody, so they are actually more stable than the root 3rd and 5th of the C major chord. The root 3rd and 5th melodically are going to behave like melodic tension notes. They're going to want to move and resolve to the sharp 11 and the sharp 9. This is a variation of the voicing, a slightly less dense one. It's 4 notes, but I'm implying the same sound. There's the full triad over shell voicing. Okay, new inversion of it. So this is one of the advantages of learning with the fundamentals and then learning how to put the fundamentals together, to accessing very advanced sounds, not by chasing after advanced complicated theory, but by taking 2 fundamentals and just being really creative and playful with how we put them together. I'm just taking a shell voicing and a triad, but because I understand how each one works alone And because I'm a curious person and playful and childlike, I can find ways to put them together that most people won't look for, because they're stuck in the traditional chord scale thinking, arpeggios, chord tones. But with very few notes, I can unlock very specific, intense, modern, advanced sounds because I know where my triad notes are. Those triad notes unlock everything immediately. I just see where they are. Like I can leap for very specific notes and know that I'm going to land on the exact note I want because I'm not looking at a 7-note scale, I'm looking at a triad. And all 3 of those notes will unlock the sound I want to imply. That's a big intervallic leap, but I'm not guessing where it's going to put me. I know where it's going to put me. Because I'm not looking at a big advanced voicing, I'm looking at a B major triad. Can you hear it? It's just right there. Okay. So that's polytonality being approached from the perspective of the fundamentals. If you dig that, I'm so bad at the YouTube thing. If you dig that, smash the like button or whatever the hell the kids say these days. All right, the next cool thing that we can do by putting the fundamentals together is we can use this respectfully. And what do I mean by that? This is a dangerous idea. Just like I talked about moving with or comping using movement versus voicings. Paul, thank you, sir. Using movement to comp can be very dangerous if you have a huge ego and aren't paying attention to the soloist and the bass player and the drummer and just kind of out there to show off how much you can move, right? You could potentially lose gigs out of that if, you could piss people off, whatever. This is the same thing. You could take this idea and run with it and just become the most out there player where nothing you do pays homage to the tradition. And there's not anything necessarily wrong with that, except that the only reason you've gotten where you've gotten is because you're standing on the shoulders of giants. Like, no, we're all like hundreds of years down the path of Bach and Mozart and Beethoven and Charlie Parker and Thelonious Monk and Bill Evans and all these incredible players. We are all surfing that wave out in the middle of the ocean, right? We're like 500 feet up in the air, standing on our surfboard, only because the wave is underneath us, pushing us up. So when I play a standard, I find that my best playing, and I tend to hear it in other people as well, but I don't like to be very judgmental, but I find that my best playing happens when I'm not doing, an ego thing, when I'm not just showing off about all the cool polytonal triads I know, but instead I'm using them to serve the tune, the composer, the tradition, right? To pay homage to the wave that is lifting me up. And in so doing, it makes me sound better. So it becomes like this wonderful symbiotic relationship. The more I humble myself and respect the tune and the tradition and the composers and the musicians that came before me, the better I sound. Not because I'm doing anything unique or creative or special, but because I'm limiting what Jordan wants and paying homage. So let's look at an actual example of what I mean by this. In the next page in the PDF, there's a snippet, the first 8 measures of the Days of Wine and Roses. You might notice in measure 1 and 2, it's an F major triad tension 2. And that's F major tension 2. That's a quadratonic triad plus tension 2. In the measure 3, and that's happening over an E flat 7 chord also, by the way. Right? It looks like it's the 3rd, sharp 11, and 13. But if you pay attention to the way it's sounding, that tension 2 wants to pull up. That F major note still feels like melodic do, like home bass. That's polytonality. Okay. In the next measure, we see the D note resolving down to C. You could think of that as the root note of D major resolving to the flat 7, which is actually a little strange if you think about it. Like the root note should be more resolved, but that's not how the melody is functioning. To me, I see that as tension note resolving to C. So the D, the root note of that chord, is actually the tension note to my ear. But that's not the note I want to dwell on. I want to talk about G minor, measure 5. We see an A note in the melody. That part. A note. If we are only thinking 1, 3, 5, 7, chord tones are important, scale runs are important, that A note should be an upper extension, a tension note. A lot of people would refer to the upper extensions as a tension note. To me, that note is not a tension note at all. That's a very stable anchor point in the melody. And how do I know that? Because if I were to try and inject, let's say, a B flat note, which is the minor third, a very important chord tone, a guide tone, if I were to try and move that A note to B flat, you'll notice that there's a sort of like gravity that wants to pull that B flat note back to A. The A note, the ninth, is going to feel more stable than the B flat note. Right, can you hear it? If you hear it, type in Y. Yes, you hear it. While, or no, maybe you don't hear it that way. That's okay too. Type an N and let me know if you don't hear it. Let's test out the G note, the root note of the chord. Like 1, 3, 5, 7, 1, right? Let's try and add the G note inside that A and see what happens. Music theory tells us chord scale thinking and chord tone theory would tell us that the G note should feel more stable. The A note is the ninth. It should be a tension. The G note, I'm seeing a lot of Ys. That's sick. I'm so happy to hear that. The G note should be more stable, but who cares what it should be? All I care about is what does my ear hear? Like what is the actual reality of this note? Here it is over G minor 7. Here it is with the G note. Can you guys hear that? Do you hear the G note wanting to pull up to A? That's how I hear it. What this tells me is that you could just play like a G Dorian sound over this if you wanted to, but you're going to miss out on all this function and melodic tension resolution. You could just use 1, 3, 5, 7, play the chord tones over this, and you would imply the harmony, but you're missing the personality of the melody if that's what you do. The personality of the melody is not a G minor arpeggio or a G Dorian mode. The personality of the melody is right. That's the tune. That's the Days of Wine and Roses. That note, that's an F note. I knew it was going to work because I know that F major is governing this area of the tune melodically, even though I'm playing over other chords. I'm not playing over an F major chord anymore. We've moved on beyond measure 1, but I still know that the F major triad is governing the melody. So I know that I can play that F note and inject it into the melody, and it's going to sound hip because it's a stable anchor point melodically. When we get to G minor, that A note is the personality of this tune. It's the DNA of the moment, okay, melodically speaking. So all that polytonal stuff that I talked about a few minutes ago can be used to just play any note you want, kind of at any moment. And as long as you understand the function, you can get away with a lot of complexity and kind of showing off ego type stuff. My preferred way to use it, and the way that it really accentuates the music and makes me sound better, in my opinion, is to look at the tune and ask myself, okay, what's happening in this tune? And then to borrow those ideas. So I'm going to argue, before I make my argument, any triad that contains an A note and works against a G minor chord, you could therefore improvise with, and it would accentuate the melody. while still giving you melodic freedom. So how about D minor? That's the one I'm going to recommend that you try. Right, because the melody is not just A, it's also a D note. Right, you hear how it sounds like the blues? Does anybody hear a quote-unquote wrong note here? Chime in, be honest, tell me, do you hear a, not intellectually, don't worry about what your brain thinks or what theory is happening. Do you hear something that if you heard it at a gig, you would like scoff at the musician and tell them like, stop playing wrong notes? It should hopefully just sound like the blues, right? But what you guys are hearing is the blues. I see a lot of no's. Awesome. I'm glad I'm not screwing this up too much. What you guys are hearing is the blues, right? That bluesy sound is actually G, G sharp, and A. As far as chord tones go, that's the root, the flat 9, and the natural 9. Yeah, Bart, the G feels unstable, right? I'm playing a very wrong note. I'm playing a flat 9 over a G minor 7, and not just a G minor 7, a G minor 7 where the 9th is in the melody. But I'm using that flat 9 as a tension note against a D minor triad. So you don't even hear it as that. You hear the blues because that's what I'm giving your ear. So I can play this, not only do you get the blues, but I'm paying homage to the melody, right? This moment in the tune is not being governed melodically by the sound of G minor. In my ear, it's being governed by the sound of D minor, the triad. And then I can use different tension notes to kind of accentuate the blues, or I can make it sound a little bit more, kind of a little more modern and colorful, let go some of that bluesiness. That should sound like our question mark note. Right, that's tension 2. That's an E note. It's tension 2 of the D minor triad. So my brain is thinking about D minor. So I'm using polytonality, which seems like a very complex thing, to actually be very humble and respectful to the tune, to try and bring the tune to life. Okay, I'm looking at the melody, asking myself what notes are really accentuated here, what feels the most stable, and then how can I improvise with them. That's, for anyone who studies with me already, you know, like that's what I obsess over the majority of the time. I could look at it and just improvise with a basic G minor triad, and it wouldn't necessarily sound wrong. It just wouldn't feel quite as alive. Okay, so we can use basic G Dorian or G minor 7 arpeggios. We could, I think, more effectively use a G minor triad with tension notes. At least then we have phrases happening, but those phrases would be built on implying the harmony rather than the personality of the tune. The personality is hiding inside the melody. So that is another benefit of learning the fundamentals, getting into more advanced playing with the fundamentals, is that you can just start to see triads hiding inside the tune and then improvise with basic triads, but all of a sudden you'll be like implying very mature sounds. Bart, guessing you still don't pick a triad that actually changes the bass chords, meaning the D major would put a natural 7 or the G minor. I want to be careful here. You could, but remember what I said a minute ago about polytonality, like we can get very flashy and showy, and usually that has to do with this like intellectual ego kind of story about how we want to present ourselves to the world versus why are we doing any of this, like this very humble, respectful thing. You definitely could, and I probably have. And if it suits the tune, like in this case, the D major still works within the context of the tune. So you're still being respectful to the tune. You're just kind of changing the function, right? You're tonicizing the G minor chord because when you go to like a minor major chord, which D major would turn it, D major triad would turn this into G minor major. That minor major is going to make it more of a stable harmony versus minor 7, which has a tendency to be treated more, to be more of a 2 chord that wants to move. So yes, you definitely could. How about A major triad? That's pretty out there. I think did I record? Right? Did you hear it? Very outlined, but it was just an A major triad. Okay, so I'm still implying the melody, but now I'm getting a little wackier. We can do full-blown reharmonizations. We don't have to play it as a G minor chord either. We could completely play a totally different chord if we wanted to. That G minor could very easily be treated as a B flat major. G minor moving to B flat minor is implying the same idea as a major 4 moving to a minor 4. We are in the key of F major. We could just replace G minor with B flat major, and now we have a new chord progression. We have a 1 chord, move into major 4, minor 4, right? It's the same thing. It's the same thing that we see in the bird blues, right? We see it in rhythm changes, major 4, minor 4. It's in a ton of standards. This one is a slight variation on it where we go from the 2 chord to the minor 4. Same idea though. And then if we want to get super out there and disrespectful to the tradition and we want a very angular sound, you could just completely change it to something that has nothing to do with G minor if you wanted to. So yes, for sure. Jerry, the pedal, my sustain pedal is the what's it called? The Game Changer Plot. The Game Changer Audio is the company, and the model is called the Plus. Not the cheapest sustain pedal, but it has some really cool features if you want something a little bit less, a little more affordable. Electro Harmonics has the freeze pedal, which I tried back in the day, and it was too loud. Every time you turn it on, it makes this very loud pop that came through the amp, and that's very disruptive. I've heard since then there was like a customized mod you could do to it to make it stop that, but I didn't feel the need to spend money to buy something that I then had to spend money to fix to make it usable. So I just bought this instead. But I've heard since then that I think Electro Harmonics has gone ahead and just done the mod pre-sale now. So like it's just built the way it should have been built in the first place. So, but I use the Game Changer Audio Plus. Okay. We need to start to wrap up because, got to get on with the day. The next thing I want to point out that we can do here, we've been talking about playing triads and shells kind of together to create polytonality, starting with the voicing and then separating that voicing out to be able to think about, improvising a single line over, let's say, a piano player playing a chord. This idea of being able to see the fundamentals, 2 basic fundamentals, also frees us up to be in control of both fundamentals, triads for melody, shell voicings for harmony. And I've kind of already been doing it a little bit, but to develop a conversational language for solo guitar playing or trio playing, not built on harmonizing every note, but on playing really strong, authoritative melodic phrases, and then accompanying ourselves with intriguing chord movement, right? You hear that A, B flat, A. I'm really accentuating the stability of the A note. So for me, this actually simplifies solo guitar playing because now I don't need, that wild like Tuck Andrus, Martin Taylor virtuosic technique. Not that I'm anti-technique, but it's not super necessary to just be able to sit down and play a gig solo guitar. I don't need virtuosic technique, and I don't need to harmonize every note and kind of lose the essence of great melody by trying to put too many chords and notes in. Not to say that we can't do that. We could take all that idea, the voicings, the vertical voicings from the polytonal stuff I was just talking about, and we can learn to harmonize any note in the melody we want, but it's no longer 100% necessary because we can just play basic triad type phrase, basic shell voicing movement, triad phrase, shell voicing movement. We can kind of dance back and forth between the two. And even though in my mind, everything I'm looking at is a simple triad or a simple shell voicing, and I'm just thinking about really basic fundamentals here, not that it's easy if you haven't worked on your fundamentals, but I'm just looking at the fundamentals, but it comes across as a wildly seasoned and mature style of playing solo guitar because you're hearing authoritative phrases and you're hearing creative and conversational comping patterns. And then we can combine that in with polytonality. This is another way that the fundamentals can come together to almost create the illusion of something very advanced happening, even though there's not that much stuff that's advanced here. There's so much more that we could go into that I do with my students. As you get deeper into the fundamentals, so much unlocks. When I was relearning, I was just like, I just have to get really strong melody happening again and really fun creative comping. And what I found was that the more time I devoted to just each of those two activities separately, the more naturally I started realizing like, oh my gosh, like now I have all these crazy voicings. Oh my gosh, my solo guitar playing is getting better. Oh my gosh, like I can respect the melody, the tunes more. Like all these wild things just started happening because my foundation was getting built in a much stronger way than I did the first time around when I spent, 20, 25 years doing the scales, the chord scales, harmonizing the diatonic stuff, moving through the 7 diatonic chords, arpeggios, modes, like all that stuff was, it got me playing. That was fine, but it never really fully built a strong foundation for me with the basic elementary fundamentals that just kind of spoon fed me more advanced ideas. So as I delved deeper into the fundamentals to learn to improvise and to learn to comp, all these wildly complex, wonderful sounds started to unravel and unlock for me. So we're only talking about a couple of them. If you're already studying with me, I'm leaving a lot of stuff out for the sake of time here. We have liquid harmony, right? That's all horizontal thinking, applying a tension note to a triad, resolving it. So everything's moving forward. They're like chord voice. Liquid harmony is a chord voicing that has inner voice movement built inside of it. There's liquid harmony with shell voicings and diminished liquid harmony, where we can actually move around. Very similar to the Barry Harris stuff. Okay, so this is moving through different diminished shell voicings, but adding a single moving note using melodic tension resolution by just combining them. We have triad pairs start to unlock. We have quadratonic pairs. Right, triad pairs. I'm implying the sound of E major 7 by vamping on a low E note, which maybe my bass player would be doing and I could let go of, but since I'm playing solo. But I'm thinking about a G sharp minor triad and an A major triad. That's the triad pair. Quadratonic pair, I could add that melodic tension note in using liquid harmony, and it'll sound like I'm doing something wildly advanced. I could add in a melodic structure on top of that using a basic triad idea. Now I'm having a conversation with myself. I'm not using shell voicings here. I'm using triads. We can use triads to comp and to create voicings also. That's all part of the polytonality aspect. But it's built on the fact that I'm viewing all of this as E major 7, even though I'm not playing, other than that low root note, I'm not playing an E note. And again, if the piano player or the bass player were there, I probably wouldn't be wasting my energy dealing with that E note. I'm just doing it so you can hear it. I lied. There is an E note here. I forgot I was doing the A major triad. So the E note is there, but you feel how it's a tension note. That's quadratonic pairs. What else is there? We have we can add more notes than just one tension note. We can add a second tension note. Now we have a pentatonic scale. Okay. That's a triad. A triad that contains the 13, sharp 11, and 9 of this dominant chord. So I'm implying the sound of a Lydian dominant. Okay. With a triad. I'm not adding any phrases to it yet. I'm not adding tension notes. I know exactly how to accentuate those notes and make them feel stable. Now, if I add one tension note, I have a quadratonic. I can now play lyrical, bluesy phrases. Okay. I can add chromaticism into it. I have all 12 notes at my disposal. There's my Batman note. No. So now I'm playing a pentatonic scale built on a triad with 2 tension notes. You can hopefully hear the tension resolution. What's wild is that the 3rd and the 7th of this dominant chord are the 2 tension notes. So those notes that sounded like they wanted to move are the guide tones, which means if you're jumping straight for guide tone thinking and playing, you won't be able to fully access this sound because you're treating them as important notes. I'm treating them as, okay, I'm going to play it, but I have to get off of it immediately. Okay, I can add a 3rd note to this, 3rd tension note. Now we have a 6-note scale. Notice that this B note feels the most stable, even though I'm playing over an A7. Why? Because I'm playing with a B major triad. I'm not thinking about A7, I'm thinking about B major. There's the blues. I can build it right into the triad. Now I'm treating the 3rd, 5th, and flat 7 of A as my melodic tension notes. They all want to move to something more colorful. That's an E note over an A7. It wants to pull down a D sharp. The fifth wants to resolve to the sharp 11. Once I have this 6-note scale, then we can expand this out. We have a 9-note and a 12-note scale in melodic triads. They're not necessary. Again, we're just like going further and further and further up the mountain. At a certain point, you're more than welcome to just stop next to the waterfall and enjoy the sunset. You don't have to climb to the top of the mountain. But these are all things that started for me to unlock somewhat naturally the more time I spent just with basic triads and shell voicings and understanding how the two function together versus getting stuck in like a textbook way of intellectually understanding things. What happens when we let the ear be north on the compass, right? We have triads and shell voicings. Those are like our two oars. If we're rowing in a boat, we have a triad oar and a shell voicing oar, and the ear is north on the compass. And as long as we follow that and get playful with how we use the fundamentals together, it just unlocks really clean, precise, advanced sounds. What else am I leaving out? There's so much that we can do with this stuff. I think we're gonna have to call it because I gotta run. My challenge to you, take that voicing I wrote out, that major 7, sharp 11, sharp 9, and try plugging it into a standard in place of a regular major 7, specifically a major 7, sharp 11. Because the sharp 11's in there, it's best to sort of use it in a functionally logical place, like a place where it fits in nicely. So Autumn Leaves, that's C major 7, is technically the 4 of the key. So that would be like a sharp 11. How about that E flat major 7 in Stella? That's the 4, right? We're in the key of B flat. We just went to the E flat major 7. So that's a major 7 sharp 11. So throw that voicing in Stella and see if you can pull it off. Yeah, see if you can throw that voicing into a tune you know really well in place of a major 7. If you can, try implying that voicing by using the major triad a half step below the chord. So in Autumn Leaves, if you're playing C major 7, if that's the harmony in measure 4, what's a half step below C major 7 or a half step below C? B. So see if you can try improvising built around that B major triad. If you're not comfortable with triads, don't worry about tension notes. Just add the B major triad. Okay, see if you can accept the reality of that B major triad and that it can work. What else is worth trying? Play around with the D minor triad over, the hell's the name of the tune we talked about? Days of Wine and Roses. See if you can feel the D minor-y nature of that moment. You don't have to add any tension notes if you don't want to. Okay, I don't know if you could hear the looping pedal is a little quieter than I remembered it being. But just play a D minor, see if you can come up with a rhythmic way of expressing a D minor triad without just falling into, because that's going to sound boring because arpeggios are not melody. So mess around with that, see if you can do that. I think on the last page of the PDF, I put a couple of different challenges for for you to consider. Give them a shot. Come back tomorrow. Okay. We're going to do a short Q&A because I do want to make sure I answer questions. I see a lot of comments in here and I have to wrap up because I'm way over time on this. But there's just so much information I want to be able to squeeze into these. I do want to make sure I can answer questions. So come back tomorrow. We're going to do a shorter Q&A than normal because it's our last day. And for those of you who are not already studying with me and who are interested in learning more about this approach, and either need help mastering the fundamentals or want to start digging into improvisation and comping or want to get into more advanced application ideas, I'm going to talk about some ways we can do that. I am going to give everybody a heads up. We're going to do a Q&A and then I'm going to stop and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I do and make an offer about how I might be able to help. So if you don't want to hear the offer, all good. Like I'm telling you now, it's going to happen. And I will give a fair warning and let everybody who's not interested in that, or if you're already studying with me, or if you just wanted the free stuff, totally cool. I'm going to give you a heads up so that you guys can log off because I'm not interested in like talking about, how I can help people if they're not actually interested in it. So come back tomorrow, at least for the Q&A, so I can answer some questions. And then if you're interested in learning more about the way I teach, my website is totally out of date. The public side, the front side. Over the last like 6 months, 8 months, I've been reformatting a lot of stuff, building a lot of stuff. So if you've been checking out the website to get info on how I might be able to help and what I do for teaching, the vast majority of what you are reading on my website is incorrect. So I'm going to talk about it tomorrow. Okay. There's a lot of new programs. There's new formats to the programs. There's a lot of new stuff. So come back tomorrow, ask some questions. And if you're interested in working together, I'll talk a little bit about how I can help. And then I'll be available to answer questions about those programs also. Thank you guys so much for hanging. Really appreciate it. Awesome to see you guys. Justin, James, Glenn, Blue Green Hobby. I wish I knew your real name, man. Jerry, James, Mike, Ron, Killer. When I wrap up from here and I have a few minutes, I'll read through some of the comments. But right now, I just wanted to say hey to everybody. Thanks again for hanging. What's the YouTube thing? Hit the like button, smash the like button. If you're not subscribed yet, subscribe. I don't really do that much on YouTube. I mainly teach on my website and sometimes on my Facebook, in my Facebook group. So if you're not following me on Facebook, the Melodic Triads study group. Actually, I don't think it's called the study group anymore. Just Melodic Triads. You can search for Melodic Triads jazz guitar. You'll find us, or shoot me an email and I'll send you a link. Thanks for hanging. Hope to see you guys tomorrow. Enjoy the weekend. We'll talk soon.